Welcome to the Story Fulfilled podcast, where we deep dive into how each character and story in the Bible come together to fulfill the story of God.
And just before we get into today's story and episode, we want to put out a warning that today's story does involve some heavier topics, including suicide. So if you're listening with your kids, parents, you might want to listen along together. And yeah, we'll get back into the episode.
I'm Jay.
I'm Fletcher.
And I'm Abby.
And today's story is about Judas.
Dun, dun, dun.
And of course, we have a question.
Out of all of your friends, who's most likely to betray you?
She just jumped in there. See, she put this in as a question, and Fletcher and I were like, we're not answering that. We're not going to answer who's the most likely to betray us.
I'm going to answer it because
Abby's going to betray her friend right now.
I am, because my friend is Fletcher.
Oh.
And here's why.
Why?
Fletcher has betrayed me. We went to laser tag one time. And we were on the same team. And he's like, it's okay, guys. It's okay. Like, I'll stand behind you. And so him and Riley, his wife, and No. And so Riley and I were like taking the front and he was watching our backs.
Oh, yeah.
Turns out he was just shooting us in the back the entire time.
Wait, he wasn't on your team then?
He was on our team.
Oh, yeah, because you can friendly fire.
Can you get friendly
Yep.
fire?
Yeah.
And just
Yes,
doesn't it like count against you?
It came up on the scoreboard, and it was like, who shot you the most? And I had Fletcher.
Involve some heavier
Maybe I lied about
topics,
being on
suicide.
team.
I don't think
No, you
friendly
were on
fire.
our
Either way,
team.
it's a betrayal.
You betrayed me. You
Together.
And the fact that he used the two of you as a human shield.
I know.
That's like
I think I
betrayal
won,
on
though.
a number of levels.
I don't remember if you won or not. I just remember that you betrayed me.
That's amazing. Now, Fletcher and I aren't brave enough to answer that question, so we have another question. Judas traded Jesus for the equivalent of about $200 today. So the question was two parts for this question. If someone gave you $200 to spend in the next 10 minutes, what would you buy?
Quick.
And what would you give up for $200?
I already answered one first, so somebody
All
else
right.
has to
So
go first.
my answer for what would I buy in the next, 20 minutes? 10 minutes?
10 minutes.
10 minutes.
I would go to the gas station and fill up mine and my wife's car, and that would be roughly $200.
That is
at this point.
incredible. That's amazing.
That's good.
And
I
then,
thought you were
whatever
gonna,
spare, I'll just give to somebody else.
I thought you were gonna
fill up.
say like you would go into the gas station and just buy like slushies.
No, what a
and
waste.
Get
treats
the gas.
and
I'd even go with premium.
yeah.
I can afford it now.
Well, with the extra money, you can get a car wash.
Oh, they're like $70 now too.
You can get them for $15.
$15 for.
The
There you go.
cheapy one.
If you spend enough in gas, which everyone does.
That's a good one.
I hate the
That's
gas
a good
station.
one. Okay, and what would you give up for $200?
Ooh, Klondike bars. No,
What would you do for one?
$200. I mean, I'm trying, to eat a little healthier. So maybe give up sugary foods and I get paid for it instead of
Right,
just
there you go.
suffering and
That's fair.
Yeah.
not eating good food.
Okay.
I have to do it for free.
Okay.
Why not get some money out of it?
Yeah. I'm gonna be reasonable like Fletcher, and I'm gonna buy groceries with the $200. But it's gonna be like I'm gonna get the fancier cheeses and meats and
High quality.
and like the not the no name bubbly, but the real bubbly and stuff like that.
Oh man, our standards are low.
Yeah, I'm a boring, and even I was saying like I have a hard time putting together a Christmas wish list because that's just so. Groceries, $200, but really good groceries like the higher end stuff.
Well, you say the really good grocery. You just mentioned like bubbly and cheese.
But good cheese.
Did you mean like Black Diamonds instead of no name
No,
or like
good imported cheeses and
okay.
stuff
That's
like
gonna be
that.
$200.
And go to the olive bar
and
get some
put
of
it
the
in.
good
Yeah.
olives and stuff like
So a
that.
fancy charcuterie board.
Yeah, I'm just charcuterie shopping. And giving up for $200, I would gladly give up 50 pounds. So if anyone
feel
has
like-
$200,
I feel like when I wrote this question, it was more something that you wanted to have, like
Right.
a friend that you would give up to. But whatever.
yeah, like what would you
Yeah.
betray?
You
Who
guys are
would you
picking,
betray? Yeah,
things
we're-
you just, So, anyways.
Oh well, you have to
whatever.
answer that version.
there
now
you
that
go. Yeah,
brought
you
it up.
answer your version of
I
it.
already did. I already said Fletcher.
For 200.
In laser tag. What would I want to spend in the next 10 minutes? I think I want to go on a trip. So
You buy
it's
like a
gonna
bus
go-
ticket?
No, I actually found flights. What did I say, Jay?
Swoop Airlines.
Yeah,
they
there
were
was
like $80
yeah, for a one-way to BC.
Yeah.
So for $200 I could get a round
back.
trip.
Now you're
to
locked
BC.
into certain dates that
you know
Abby
what?
can't travel in.
No, I can travel. Josh can't. So I'll go by myself to BC.
There
you go.
And that's
Thus
what I get.
betraying Josh in the process.
There we go. What would I give up for 200? I'm
Josh.
going with Fletcher and laser tag.
Amazing. This might have evolved into my favorite question of this season. I don't know. That was pretty fun. We'd love to hear your answer to all three questions. If you are brave enough to join us on social media and let us know who is the most likely to betray you.
But fair warning, Abby might post it and they might see it. So be careful.
Abby will betray you and out you with that.
Betray.
And then we'd also love to hear, what would you spend $200 in the next 10 minutes on, and what would you give up for what? Like who
would you
or
betray?
what would you betray for $200? And of course, as always, we do encourage you to be reading the stories for yourselves to get the whole picture of what is going on. And today's story takes place in the Gospels.
Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Good job.
I think it's in all four of them.
Yeah,
It's like not all stories are in every gospel. I'm
Right.
pretty sure this one's in all four.
I think you might be right.
You're the one that did the research.
Fair
Yeah.
enough. I'm going to say yes then, hesitantly. Anyway.
Yeah, so today's story, it fits perfectly with last week, because last week we talked about the Pharisees and the Sadducees. They were the Jewish religious leaders of the time, and today's story involves both groups as well as a part of the story, and both again are in the New Testament during the life of Jesus. And today's story takes place toward the end of Jesus's life while he is in Jerusalem. So like the last week and a bit of his life.
Right. So speaking of the last week of his life, Jesus' death probably took place around April of 33 AD. So today's story takes place right around that time.
Right. Yep.
Basically the week before his death. And so in historical terms, in Israel area, Herod Antipas is the tetrarch who we talked about a few weeks ago. Like we talked about last week, the Sanhedrin can kind of control the Jewish affairs. And then a Roman named Pontius Pilate is the governor in the Judea region, which is Jerusalem.
Yep.
Yeah, and like last week, because we are still in Jesus' life, we're still in Jerusalem, which is in Israel,
Right.
modern day Israel. So there's some stories that takes place specifically in like the Garden of Gethsemane, which is near the Mount of Olives, and then also the house of John Mark. But again, all in Jerusalem, Israel.
Yeah.
Right.
Modern day.
And then to get an idea of who Judas is, so we first hear of Judas in the list of 12 disciples that Jesus chose to send out and to preach, and he gave them the authority to cast out demons. And Judas is among that group. We look at Judas through the end of his life, but we see, if we read through the scriptures, that he was a part of the work that Jesus was doing. And so according to John, he was the treasurer of the group. And we find out later on that he regularly stole from the purse. And at one point, the disciples are visiting with Lazarus, Mary, and Martha. And Mary anoints Jesus with an expensive perfume. And Judas complains that the expensive perfume could have been sold for 300 denarii.
Now, we didn't look up how much that is in modern dollars,
I'll
but
Google it.
Right.
All right.
Let you know in 1 minute.
I seem to remember, like, it's a number of months, if not a year's wages. It's a large amount of money. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, there's an account of this that doesn't mention that it is Mary, and another account I think that does. So that's there.
choose your gospel.
Choose your gospel. Yep.
Okay, wait. How much are you saying that?
300.
Yeah, but how much are you guessing it is?
I thought it was like between 6 months and a year's wages.
$215.
So it's like almost as much as what Judas, or it is around the same as much as Judas.
Interesting.
U.S. dollars. So.
U.S. Oh,
Like
so that's like
500
700.
Canadian, yeah.
And so the complaint then is that it could have been sold for that amount of money, and that money could have been given to the poor, which is an interesting complaint from someone who's skimming from the top.
Right.
And John clearly doesn't like Judas because he points out that Judas didn't care about giving the money to the poor. Instead, he carried the money box and that he would regularly pilfer it, which is another word for stealing.
It's like a pirate term, I think.
Yeah, pilfer. And Jesus explains as well that what Mary did was good and that they will always have the poor, but soon they won't have him. So speaking a little bit foreshadowing.
Giving a little bit of foreshadowing, absolutely. So Judas, now it's the week of the Passover and all the disciples and Jesus are in Jerusalem. And sometime during this week, Judas slips out and goes to the high priests and the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And he kind of goes, look, I want to betray Jesus. How much are you going to guys pay for me? How much are you guys going to pay me to betray him? And the high priests are like, well, we've already been trying to figure out some way to arrest him. If you remember last week's episode, they were doing everything they could to try to get Jesus arrested and trouble out of the picture. So they offer Judas 30 pieces of silver, and he takes it and then starts looking for a way or an opportunity to betray Jesus. So that's when our main story starts, is the night of the Passover meal. It's the Seder feast, and they're eating supper in John Mark's upper room, and there's a whole story about how they got to that room and who found it. But Jesus does a bunch of stuff while they're eating supper. He washes his disciples' feet and talks about how they should be servants. And then he also talks about his death and the new covenant that's going to come with that. There's the whole famous, this is my body broken for you. And he sets up communion, and he does all sorts of really important things. Just go read about the Last Supper, and Jesus teaches a lot and talks a lot about his death and what it means.
Right.
But at one point, Jesus says that one of his disciples would betray him. And of course, all the disciples are like, oh, is it me? Is it me? And Peter, is it me? Is it me? And he comes up and, hugs Jesus. Is it me? And Jesus, in the Gospel of John, you can read it. He says, whoever I give this bread that I dipped into the cup is the one. So then he dips the bread and he gives it to Judas. And as soon as Judas, eats it, the Gospel of John says that Satan entered into Judas and Jesus sent him away saying, go do what you're going to do.
Right.
And then the disciples heard Jesus say, go do what you're going to do. Mm-hmm. But they had no idea what was going on. They're like, oh, maybe he's going to get, the meal ready. Maybe he's going to get some errands or give something to the poor. So they didn't know what Jesus was talking about. But clearly Jesus knew and knew Judas's plan.
Right.
So as soon as Judas leaves, he then goes to the high priest and start putting his plan together and putting his plan into action. They give him like a bunch of Roman soldiers and some temple guards to go arrest Jesus. And of course, Jesus then goes to the Garden of Gethsemane with his disciples and he starts praying, and there's a whole famous scene going on there. Mm-hmm. But in the meantime, Judas arrives with his soldiers and his guards with torches and weapons. And Judas's plan is he's going to go up to Jesus, and the person that he identifies as Jesus is going to receive a kiss. Right. So that's his plan, and he goes up. And as he goes to approach Jesus and give him a kiss, Jesus interrupts him and saying, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss?
Right.
And then it all goes down. Of course, the story of Peter slicing off a guard's ear and Jesus putting it back on. But eventually, Judas is just filled with regret for what he's done. He's realized that he's betrayed Jesus, and he just runs. He regrets it, and he tries to give the money back. He takes his 30 pieces of silver. He goes to the priest, and he goes, look, take this back. I don't want it. I've made a mistake.
Right.
And then the priests go, well, we can't take this money back to the temple. It's blood money, which I find very, very hypocritical because they paid him the blood money in the first place. So he just throws the money on the ground and runs off. Just completely regretting what he had done and feels terrible for it. And then last thing that we hear of Judas is that he goes out in a field and he hangs himself on a tree. And then it says that he, a couple different accounts of what happened there. But the end story is Judas, regretting what he had done, ends up killing himself instead of, trying to resolve it. He finishes off. Yeah. Quite the story, Judas.
Thanks for the happy ending there, Fletcher.
Yeah, sorry, I had to tone it down. I didn't want to sound excited telling that story.
If you like what you're hearing, we would love if you rated and subscribe to us on whatever platform you're listening to. It really helps us to get out to more audience viewers. Thanks for listening.
Let's talk about what he did. So he was antagonist, of course, this season. Judas obviously can be portrayed as an antagonist because of his actions.
Right.
What did he do wrong? Where did he start going wrong?
Well, that's that question right there. Where did he start going wrong? I think is the one that I would love to know the answer. I wish there was a passage that pointed out this is where things started to go. And maybe it is. Maybe it's in the house where he complains about the wages, but John points out that he's been pilfering already up to this point. So when did it go wrong?
Because it starts off great. He's one of the 12. He's anointed by Jesus to go out and preach and teach. And he's even he's given authority to cast out demons. So he's one of the disciples that go and spread the good news of Jesus.
Yeah.
At one point, there's a change that goes on.
Yeah. It's an interesting question because like I said, there is no
definitive
verse necessarily that says this is when it happened, and so that we can then take a lesson from that and say, okay, don't do that. Don't do what Judas did. One thing that I do see that happens that I think is an encouragement for us in our faith, especially for those who find themselves doubting their relationship with Jesus. In the encounter or during the Last Supper, and Jesus says, one of you will betray me. All of the disciples, except for Judas, say, is it me, Lord? They kind of line up and they're asking that question, Lord, is it me? And they're not sure. Am I the one that's going to betray you? I don't want to betray you, Jesus. Is it me? And Judas says, surely it is not me. And so I think what we see there in the attitude of the disciples is this recognition that they have it within them to betray Jesus. Like, I have it within me to forfeit, to walk away, to say, Jesus, I'm done with you, or whatever. And when I recognize that, I'm putting myself at his feet and begging for his mercy that he would continue to keep me in the grip of our relationship. And so I think that that's what the disciples are doing, and that's what Judas is not doing. Judas is saying, no, I'm good. I'm good. I'm going to do things my way. And we see obviously the ramifications of that. And so I think it's an important thing for us to understand, especially, as I said, when we find ourselves in that place of doubt and insecurity in our relationship with Jesus, that's actually the most secure place to be. If we're asking, can I betray you, Jesus? Then the answer is, yeah, you actually can, but I'm going to seek you out. And we see that as well with Peter, because Peter denies Jesus and Jesus seeks him out on the beach and he restores him. And you wonder, okay, Judas, had you not acted so rashly following your rash decision, could you have had that restoration interaction with Jesus where he meets you and he has this conversation and redeems you? Because that's it. Even what Judas did is not irredeemable by Jesus.
That's exactly what I was going to say too. We even see that Judas was, stealing money originally, and then eventually he's actually possessed by Satan, it says. But once he realizes he has that regret, that's the moment where he has a decision to make. So you see exactly what Jay said, the contrast between Judas and Peter's reactions to once they know they have sinned. Right. And Judas just, in his regret, he doesn't take time to think, okay, I need to go make this right. He almost gives up. And he gives up.
Yep. That's it.
And goes off and does a terrible thing and makes a mistake. Whereas Peter, after he messes up, he runs away, but then he comes back, realizes his mistake, and seeks repentance. And there's a difference between regret and repentance, I think is a good emphasis to make, is there has to be reconciliation with repentance. It's not just, I feel terrible for what I've done. You have to make it better in some way.
Yeah, exactly. And so when there is sin in your life, when you recognize that, you have an opportunity to give up and to kind of resign yourself to that, or to bring it to the Lord. And that's the role of conviction in our lives. And so we need to bring that to Jesus.
Absolutely.
I also think it's kind of like the story has always been encouraging to me in a way. And as I'm in a shepherding role in a lot of ways at my work and in my personal life. And so the fact that Jesus had one of his disciples, he had a choice to follow him or not, and he did not end up being with Jesus in the end, right? And it was Judas's choice, and this is my free will argument, but I'm not going to go into that. Right. But the idea that it's not up to you, like grace requires nothing of you. I love that line. It's literally all up to Jesus. And if there is somebody that you are in like a mentoring role over or with in that kind of relationship, it is not up to you. Their salvation is not up to you. And so I think that can be really encouraging to people that are in the shepherding role as well. Because obviously if Jesus didn't fail, right? That he is not the one that failed in this situation. Yeah. And so, I think a fallen disciple is not the mark of a discipler. No. Yeah. So, anyways.
Awesome. Yeah. I think we may have actually answered the question preemptively again.
You know, I actually considered as soon as Fletcher finished the story about asking the question then. Right. But I was like,
maybe we could put it in post. You just stick it in.
That's not going to happen. No. All right.
And if it's in there, you'll know. So
well, you heard how the story of Judas and Jesus starts to fulfill the rest of the story of the Bible. You can go back and listen to that again. Yep. And let us know your thoughts. But that's all that we have for today.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us.
And again, as always, if you have any questions or comments or want to talk to us, hit us up on our social media, Instagram, or email us at story@bfmc.org.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for listening.
Love to hear from you. Bye for now.
Bye.